This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you're struggling through the pains of alcohol or drug addiction or a mental health disorder, now's the time to seek the help you need. Let this be an opportunity to get back on track and finding the real you. You're not alone, and Promises Behavioral Health is here and they can help you. Now, we've worked with Promises for years now. We know their teams personally. We have great relationships with them. And most importantly, we trust Promises. That means you can too. To learn more about Promises treatment options near you, here's what you can do. You can go to promisesbehavioralhealth.com/soberguy, or you can call 888-205-1890. That's 888-205-1890. Tell them that you heard about them from that Sober Guy podcast. This morning and every morning on the way to the gym, I drink a no carbs company. NoCo, as it's also known by the can, is a beverage packed with branched chain amino acids, vitamins, 180 milligrams of caffeine. It's sugar-free and it tastes amazing. It's also made with green tea extract and has 4 different vitamins. It's now available in 5 different flavors. And look, if the caffeine is an issue, they have a couple of options, which are caffeine-free too as well. So for more information or to order a case of NoCo, it's No Carbs Company, go to noco.com. That's NOCCO.com and pick up your favorite No Carbs Company drink today.
That Sober Guy podcast contains adult content, merciless truth, and emotional nudity. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm Shane Raymer. You're listening to That Sober Guy podcast, and we help people stay sober. If it's your first time listening, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here today. Our guest today is Wendy Adamson, and so excited to talk to Wendy today. Wendy is a mental health professional. She's spent over 25 years serving individuals who are struggling with addiction and mental health disorders. In that time, she's provided counseling, facilitated groups, interventions, crisis management. She's executed treatment plans which have led hundreds of individuals to finding a way out of a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Wendy also has multiple articles in the Huffington Post, 2 published memoirs, Load and Incorrigible, where she shares her own struggles with addiction and her ultimate recovery, which had led to profound healing within her own family system itself. So super excited to talk to Wendy today. We're going to get to her in just a minute. You can find all of our resources, like our free 10-day guide to help jumpstart your life without alcohol, our 30-day quit drinking dude challenge, which I love, by the way. Lots of dudes out there taking that. You can also join our Sober Guy men's crew. You get meetings, podcasts, all the resources by going to thatsoberguy.com. It's www.thatsoberguy.com. And you can be sure to follow us on Instagram at That Sober Guy Podcast. All right, everything we talk about today will be in the show notes, easy for you to find. Let's get to Wendy now. Wendy, it's so very nice to meet you. You're down in Southern California. I'm up in Northern California. And through the great awesomeness of technology, we're connecting today to do this podcast. So how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's just so nice to meet you in person.
It is. And I got to give a shout out to our friend TJ Woodward, who helped connect us. And actually, TJ is going to be coming back on the podcast here shortly, just in the next couple of weeks. So I'm excited about that. But thanks, TJ, for connecting Wendy and I today. And man, it's just great to sit down with you. And where do we start? Maybe just give us a little background on yourself.
So, I'm from Los Angeles, born and raised, and I came from, one of those dysfunctional homes. My mother was schizophrenic, and back when I was growing up, we weren't allowed to talk about that. There was a lot of stigma, and there's still stigma involved in mental illness, and that's kind of what led me to writing about it, because I thought that, people that go through it need to have a voice, need to hear other people that are going through it or have been through it and gotten to the other side. But she killed herself when I was 7. And I never processed that grief. We never talked about it. It was like, hush, hush, don't talk about it. Don't tell anybody. And it was just a secret, and with secrets comes suffering. We're as sick as our secrets. And so when I found alcohol, initially it was alcohol that gave me the relief I was looking for, and that, then it led to drugs, and I circled the drain for many years. I met someone, and then my bottom came in the early 90s when I was doing methamphetamine, and I had a psychotic break. And the interesting thing about it, I was 38, the same age as my mother was, 38, when she had her psychotic break and killed herself. Wow. I had a psychotic break in a meth-induced classic psychotic break. I ended up shooting my husband's girlfriend in the arm, and went to jail, and I had two boys, two sons. One was 16. He wasn't home that night. My 9-year-old son was home that night, and, I plucked right out of their lives. So It was like the whole family system fragmented, needless to say. But inevitably, it's what got me sober. It's the catalyst, because they're in the county jail. Once again, I was blaming everybody else. It was my mother's fault. It was my father's fault. Now it was my husband's fault for cheating on me. Because, I saw my life through a lens of victimhood, and the language I spoke was victimese. I just blaming everybody else, not taking responsibility. And, it was a shift that happened in the county jail for me, that I had this vision of finding success, but I had no idea what success was. Was it enough money in the bank account? Was it a good job? Was it another husband? I knew it. I knew I wanted to, deeply wanted to make amends to my boys. I really wanted to, this trajectory that my family, the lineage was on, I wanted to change that. I didn't know how at first, but the one thing that I knew, it had something to do with getting sober. I'd have to get sober to find out what is success means, because I didn't know.
Gosh, I relate to so much of that. And, you kind of touched on it, and some of the notes I have here too, was the intergenerational trauma. Right. And so that makes me, I feel like that ties into some of the stuff with your mother, and dealing with that. And so like one of the questions that, when I go on other podcasts, people ask me is, well, what's one of your biggest successes? Right. And I always love I believe this in my heart. One of my biggest successes is breaking that generational curse of being passed down through. So now my son, he just told me the other day on a walk, we we're on a little evening time walk. He's 7. His name's Cash. Awesome kid. I love him so much. And he goes, "Hey Dad," he goes, what if I get tempted to try alcohol one day or drink?" He said, I don't want to do that, Dad. I want to be sober like you. And I just it even almost makes me tear up right now just thinking about it, because that time that you said, even you explained it too, you knew there was something more, but you knew that it started with getting sober. So I just relate to that so much. Thanks for pointing that out. How do we talk a little bit more about the intergenerational trauma? And then what are your thoughts, if you have a response or anything to kind of what I just shared?
Well, first of all, I love his name, Cash. That's a great name. Yeah, I love that. You. 7 years old. That's so sweet. Yeah. And 7 years old was how old I was when my mother killed herself.
Wow. That's, man, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it caused a big gap in my life. But it's so great that you have this, you're sharing this experience, like we talked about hiking, sharing nature with your son. And it's a beautiful thing, it's just by leading by example, and the intergenerational trauma that is imprinted on us. It's imprinted in our psyche. It's not so much what we say as parents, it's what we do. When I got out of jail, my eldest son, the 16-year-old, was in a juvenile detention center. I had been in a juvenile detention center. I was, labeled incorrigible. That's one of my books. And incorrigible means unable to be corrected. So the court system labeled me unable to be corrected or reformed, put me in the system, and I, went to foster homes and everything. Now, fast forward, my son is following in my footsteps, right? He's following in my footsteps. I'm unconsciously following in my mother's footsteps. Yeah. I ended up going to the same psychiatric hospital, not when I went to jail, but before that, that she had been in, So it's like, it's imprinted on it. And it's like, as long as the family's not addressing it or talking about it or being open or keeping it secret, then there is nothing can be let out into the light to heal, and that's another thing that happens first I started going back to juvenile hall and talking to the girls in juvenile hall, sharing my experience, using everything that I went through as a tool to help somebody else. That's what I learned from other people in my life and other recovering people in my life. And so I started doing that. And the first time I went back to Selmar Juvenile Hall, it's in the Valley, same place I'd been as a kid. And I was talking to those girls, and it was almost like, recovery to me means recovering those parts of ourselves that we abandoned. The 14-year-old girl that I abandoned every time I got drunk or had a blackout. The 15-year-old girl that ran away from home. All of those pieces of me by using it to be of service. Yeah. But the intergenerational trauma was repeating itself. And I do believe it's the greatest gift. It is the greatest gift. Getting sober for me it's the best thing that ever happened. Yeah. Because I could heal and be another example. The woman that was circled the drain, and now a woman that is there for her boys. Yeah,
it's amazing, and I'm wondering if you kind of see it like this, like with your mother, and for me, it's my father in his own addictions and the way we grew up as kids. It took me to cutting out all the alcohol, starting with the alcohol and then the other substances as well, so I could regain my consciousness, number one, right? Which helped me start to kick that victim mentality that you had mentioned earlier. And over time, through the work and this practice and just changing my life, it's really enabled me to step outside and see my father now as a person and really forgive him and really be able to see that he had his own trauma he dealt with as a child, which I knew about it as a kid, but we don't see these things until we start to unlock some of this, this different level of thinking and different, ways that we can feel and forgive. And so did you find some of that with your mom too? Like were you able to kind of step out and then, did that help you kick some of that victim mentality?
Well, yeah, I think that, I became my mother. And realizing that, I didn't realize it in the county jail. I didn't realize it when I went to transitional living, Women and Children's Center. I didn't realize it for a while, but that what you resist persists, and as long as I kept her on the hook, I was on the hook. Yep. And then I had this experience, honestly, through meditation, where I was flooded with compassion for both her and my dad. It was almost like I couldn't get there with a rational mind. I had to be still to just in an instant, a quantum instant, I felt flooded with compassion for them. And I realized I was her. She was a part of me, and I believe that we're all connected. We're all we see ourselves in other people. Sometimes we don't want to look, it's too much, or we get angry or project onto them. But it's like, there is some part of me that I see in you and in others. And it's like, the world is just basically a mirror, I believe. People are holding up a mirror to you. So I had to forgive her. And I couldn't change the past. So what could I do is I could become the mother I never had.
Yeah.
For my boys, I could become the mother I never had. And the payoff from that was greater than I could have imagined.
Yeah.
Much greater.
Yeah, and your sons are doing some amazing stuff these days, and we're going to get to that here shortly, and talk a little bit about Have a Soul. But first, I wanted to talk to you about writing a little bit, the therapeutic value in writing. You've written a couple of books, and I'm a big believer in that too. When we write things down, when we let those things out, and we can visually see them and feel them, that's when there's some sort of magic in that, whether it's healing, whether it's perspective, whatever it is. So what's your take on writing, and what would you kind of maybe give a couple tips to those out there listening who maybe are like, man, maybe I should start writing. Maybe that's something that I'd like to do.
Well, yes. And if I can start that with like the cover of my book, Mother Load, which is, it's a load of dirty laundry. And with a gun on top of it. My son helped me.
It's a 38.
Yes, a 38. You know. And I'm airing my dirty laundry. But mother load is the load I carried of my mother. Okay. And also loaded gun, a loaded laundry. So I think that in writing this, there's a couple of things that I would like to talk about in writing. I found, I always journaled, and, some of my journals when I was loaded were like just chicken scratch. Yeah. And I couldn't understand it, but there was something in me that was like wanting to come out on the page. And I feel like journaling and writing is like taking the bullets out of the chamber. It's like putting them on the paper and getting them out of me so that I can see. Writing this book and writing about my mother or my father is almost like resurrecting them. It's like keeping them alive, but giving them a new narrative, because I'm owning my part now. I'm not that girl in jail saying it was my mother's fault, it was my father's fault. I'm admitting my part here in the book, which changes the narrative, because until I take responsibility, until I learn to forgive, the people that I was angry, I am hooked. Like I said, I am hooked. I am snagged on repeating the same mistakes. But writing is a way to metabolize your feelings. Like I used alcohol and drugs to metabolize my feelings, but I need an outlet. So the therapeutic value of dissecting your life, looking under the hood, and not everybody's meant to write. That's okay. That it's okay. But if you do feel that urge knocking on your door, I just say get out of the way and explore it, because nobody can tell your story. Nobody can tell my story. And when I was writing this, I was breaking the secrets, the vault. I was opening the vault on all those things I kept inside, and I was bringing it to the light. And, it's like I faced a lot of fear. It was like I procrastinated. I put it off. I talked about how I was going to write it, but it was like I was afraid to expose the family, on this level.
The secrets and
myself. And when it was about to come out, the book had been written. I'd spent so much time on it, and all of this shame started to come up, all of this shame. And I had worked on myself. I had done therapy. I had done plenty of work on myself. So it was like, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
And it's like those pathways, those neural pathways that were the architecture of my brain that was established as a kid was coming down, and I was creating a new pathway. I was like, and what happened after the book came out, not right away, but pretty quick, is the shame didn't own me anymore. I realized how the shame kept me small and kept me hiding parts of myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You said kept me small too. We have this tendency to want to, like, if I had a shell, I'd climb into that shell and just hide in it and play life small, when I know inside I can feel this fire just like blazing that wants to get out and shine and be big and grow and explore. And that shame and guilt, man, gosh, it really can't hold us back from finding that true purpose and that true, whatever we're meant to do. I don't know if, well, let me say this first before I forget too, because when you were talking about writing the story, I mentioned in the early part of the podcast, we have a 30-day quit drinking dude challenge, it's called, right? And so it's 30 podcasts in 30 days. And on day 2, the first real exercise that we have people do is they write their story out. So it could be a page, it could be 5 pages. I mean, we try to encourage at least a page, but write that out. And so you can have a visual of what that is. Do you think that that's a great exercise to write our own story out? Even if it's just a start, we don't have to master it in a day. It can be a prolonged thing maybe, but it's something that we can really see.
I think it's brilliant. I really do. I think it's like, it's like looking under the hood. It's like, how long, I don't know about you, but I used to drive cars into the ground. I would never look under the hood. I'd like blow out a gasket or something because I was too busy going from A to B, and who can be bothered changing the oil? I mean, this is back before I got sober, but
yeah.
But, like this is, to recover oneself, one has to what was I doing there? Why was I blind? What were my parents doing? And it's like, I don't know if I said this, I may have said this, but in writing about my family, I felt like, well, yeah, I did say this. It was like resurrecting them and getting a deeper understanding of my father and my mother, what they went through back then in a time that was different than today, And, but yeah, I think that you're really giving good direction there with writing your life, or starting to just exploring it.
Do you have a couple quick tips just for those who maybe they're contemplating writing and but they're like, oh, I don't know how to write, or I'd never written before. Like I talked to a lot of guys who's, I don't know, I've never really done that, but I try to encourage them. Well, just try. I mean, do you have any specific tips maybe that are just real simple where somebody could start?
Well, one thing that I do writing, creative writing groups in treatment centers down here in LA. I facilitate them. And one thing I like to do is to get intimate with the resistance. So and this could be in just any area of your life. So if you feel resistance, you want to do something, but you're procrastinating, you're avoiding, however it's manifesting. So if you write down what your resistance is saying to you, like give it a voice, give the resistance a voice and say, you can't do this, you're not worth, whatever your internal dialogue is saying, let it rip, let it get out on the page so you can see what the resistance is saying. Then do the second part, you don't have to do it right away, is to talk back to the resistance in a voice that, that you would like to adopt, a voice that that if like your best friend might have, you can do anything you want, and I'm not listening to you anymore. Yeah. Thanks for sharing, but I'm not listening to you anymore. I am going for it. So it's I think because as an addict and an alcoholic, I think that for a lot of us that, I used to stay in the vagueness, and living in the vagueness was disempowering, meaning that when it came to finances, I was very vague at where my money was going. When it came to diet, I was very vague. In relationships, very vague about, where are we at with this? Just all of this vagueness. And so my job is getting clarity. And one way to do that for me is through writing.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful tool.
So what you're saying is, with that vagueness, is we need to be very intentional about what we're writing. We need to be intentional about that goal or whatever it is that we're writing out that we're trying to get clarity on. And it was funny while you were saying that voice, for some strange reason, I'm not even a huge wrestling fan, but I just kept hearing a Hulk Hogan voice going, "Not today, brother," like not today, whatever it is that I'm struggling with. So and that's the thing. We can have a little fun with things too. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to lighten up a little bit and not take things so serious. We can still do exercises. We can still do the day-to-day stuff and be very intentional about it and enjoy it at the same time.
Another little tip before we move off the tips is like writing, because you reminded me of this, writing from a third-party perspective. Like, I like to get clients to write from, like if they have an animal, in the house, a pet, what is the pet seeing, or even to do a narrative about, like from an investigative reporter about what an outsider would see when they looked at your life. How would they report it? So it gets some distance.
Yeah.
It gets some distance. And if you put it in third person, just like a Hulk Hogan voice and looking at your life, you get some detachment from it, but it gives it a different point of view.
I love that. And it also adds to that creative element. Like, we're human beings, we're creative people. I firmly believe that every single human being has some sort of creative niche inside of them. I mean, we're all different though. And so just like that, like back to the having fun with it and then be creative, you can have some fun and be creative at the same time and still, kind of conquer some of those goals.
Yeah. I think fun is important. I think that we are creative beings. We've come here to create, and creativity doesn't have to be art, writing. It can be creating a life worth living, a purpose-driven life.
Love it.
So
let's and great stuff, by the way. That's I love that. So let's talk a little bit about Have a Soul before we wrap up today. Your son started this organization. Tell us a little bit more about it.
So Have a Soul, quickly, is when we were living in the transitional living, when I got out of jail, I couldn't afford to buy him shoes. I was on welfare, and a woman that had been through the transitional house before me bought him 2 pairs of shoes. With that came a sneaker addiction. Okay. He became a sneakerhead. Yeah. And so fast forward to his early 30s, he's got over 150 pairs of sneakers stacked up in his place from the floor to the ceiling. Okay. But the thing is, he's not happy. He feels like he has no purpose. He doesn't know what he was supposed to do. Why am I here? He's depressed. He has, stuff that he hasn't dealt with, right? And then he thought back to Becky, the woman who bought him the shoes, and he decided to give his shoes away, okay? He had like those 150, only wore about 5 pairs. So he loaded them up in the car the next day and drove around LA until he found somebody that could use a pair of shoes. So with that was like, I want to say 2014. It's been about 8 years. He's given out over 40,000 pairs of shoes. He was on the Ellen DeGeneres show before, during COVID. He was just recently on the Home Edit show, if you've seen that. Wow. Great organizing show. But more importantly than that, he gets he has found his purpose. He gets more satisfaction from giving shoes than he does from owning them. And it's been kind of like I am in the, I have done some grant writing for Have a Soul. I've done other things, but I get such satisfaction seeing that my son using his experience as a tool to help other people, that are going through similar circumstances that we went through back in the early 90s.
Yeah, it's so amazing and powerful when you hear the pursuit or the lack of pursuit at a certain moment in someone's life, when they feel hopeless, helpless, like no direction, no purpose. And then we begin to serve and we find this whole new world out there. And that's what it really sounds like with your son. And then one, like that, you mentioned that purpose-driven life. When I truly believe that's the secret to there's a couple secrets, I guess, but a couple things, but that's definitely one of the top ones to kicking addictions, to kicking depression, to finding this new life. And it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, but what it does mean is that we have purpose and that we have found something that we truly enjoy and love to do. And man, Have a Soul. Where can folks find the website? And I'll make sure I put everything in the show notes, guys, too, so you can find it easily.
Well, it's Have a Soul at HAVASOLE.com.
Got it.
So, and it's pretty comprehensive. The website's got everything up there. And it's in Instagram too. Have a Soul. It's fun to follow because you'll go on road trips with him as he delivers shoes to Portland, to Texas. We're mostly local, but we do some outreach to certain cities. And we have a lot of support from certain players and owners of teams, the NBA.
Nice.
And so, it's, the thing that is really unique about Have a Soul is that it takes the sneaker culture, which is a kind of a materialistic culture about getting more and more and more.
Yeah.
And it's a young culture. It's a hip culture. It takes them and changes the lens, if you will. It's like, how can you use your experience to be of service? So the volunteers, and we have a huge volunteer base that come out there, are kind of tricked into service. They find out, wow, this is so cool because our shoes are coming in from Nike. We're getting shoes from Nike, and so we're giving them pretty fresh sneakers, and they're in an instant so simple. It's so profound. It's almost biblical. Putting shoes on someone's feet. We're not just here's a pair of shoes. We're putting it on their feet, and it's like that kind of kindness to somebody who's been kicked to the curb. Can be it. I believe in the power of kindness. I tried to hold up a persona, tough girl when I first got out of jail. I was just a scared girl, smoke and mirrors. But I had no defense against kindness, Yeah,
that's why they say that's like the best weapon, right? Being kind.
So powerful.
I just followed Have a Soul on Instagram. Great account, by the way. Lots of good stuff. I'm excited to look through it. So it's at Have HAVASOLE at Have a Soul. If you want to follow, we'll put that in the show notes as well too. So shout out to your son, man. Both your sons. It's awesome stuff. Like it's really cool. I'm excited.
He got married. The youngest son got married Saturday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Congrats. That's awesome. Start a family and that's way cool.
It was cool.
Well, good stuff, Wendy. It's been great to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much. If folks want to reach out to you, if they want to find more about you or your books, where can they do that?
Well, they can go to my website, wendyadamson.com, or they can find me on Facebook or on Instagram. It's #2 and then Jedi, JEDI. And I post a lot of stuff on Instagram, Have a Soul stuff and my son's wedding and, just awesome. The gambit.
Yeah. Well, good stuff, Wendy. It was great to meet you. Hopefully we keep in touch, and thank you so much for coming on That Sober Guy podcast. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Share the podcast with a friend. Connect with us on Instagram at That Sober Guy podcast. Thanks again to Wendy for coming on the podcast today. Check out our Sober Guy men's group on the Locals platform. You can find all of our resources, the Quit Drinking Dude 30-Day Challenge, podcast, meetings, all kinds of good resources at thatsoberguy.com. Peace, love, and respect. Keep your blood clean.